Hi everyone. In this video I will show you how you can create a blueprint widget that loads a video with a slider and a progress bar, so you can drag your video forwards or backwards like so to any spot within the playback range. Just a couple of caveats to this. One is that this only really works well with image sequences. If you have a compressed video like MP4 for example, then it really doesn't work very well. And the second thing is that just from my experience, I found it doesn't work that well with 4K videos. The playback is quite choppy, so it's best to keep this to HD or a resolution beneath that. And finally, just a credit to a post from a user called EveryNone that provided a very useful base for me to create this blueprint as well. And I'll leave a link to that in the description. But now let's jump straight into things. So in the content browser, right click, create a new folder, call that movies, and then double click into that folder, right click. Let's add another folder and let's call this Sea Turtle. This is just the name of the video. It could be any name you want, of course, depending on what the name of your video is. Now let's double click into that. Let's right click, go to media, and in this case it's image media source. We can rename this to Sea Turtle. So now I'm going to double click on the Sea Turtle file to open that up. And on the right hand side there's a row that says sequence path, and this is where we can select the source file. So in this case that will be an image sequence that we will use as the video. But before we do that, I'm just going to reduce the size of this panel because the actual source files has to sit inside of the project folders, and specifically the movie folder. Otherwise it doesn't get packaged up in the game. So one way we can do that is I'm just going to go back a step in the folder structure, and on the Sea Turtle folder I'm going to right click, and where it says show in Explorer I'm just going to click on that, and I'll just bring that file explorer on screen. And obviously this is just an empty folder at the moment, and I'm just going to drag onto screen also my actual image sequence. So this is in another folder outside of this project folder, this Unreal Engine project folder. I'm just going to Control A, then Control C to copy all of them, and back in the Sea Turtle folder I'm going to go Control V to paste them in, and that's done. So on the bottom right hand side you may have a little pop-up coming up that says, do you want to import this content? You can actually click no on this, as it doesn't matter. As long as the source files are in the folder, that's fine. If you do import it, you'll have hundreds or even maybe thousands of preview images. So I'm just going to drag this window out the way, and now where it says sequence path I'm going to click on the three dots, navigate to the Sea Turtle folder. I can select the first image. You don't have to select them all, just selecting one of them is fine, and then click on open and click on open. Then we can see that's working fine. Okay, we can save this now and close it down. And the next thing we need to do is just create a media player to actually play the video. So we can right click in the content browser, go to media, and then media player. This is additional assets to create. This is just a media texture, so tick that box as we need that, and then click OK. And then we can call this MP underscore video player, MP just for media player of course. Then press enter, and that creates a media player. So now we can right click on the media texture. We can actually rename it first, so we can go up to rename or press F2 to rename it and call this MT for media texture, and then just call that video. And now we can right click on that media texture, go up to the top and click on create material, and then just call this M underscore video. And we can double click on the material and just increase that size. We just need to do a couple of things here. Though in material domain on the left hand side where it says surface, click on that and change it to user interface. And then in the graph, just drag off of texture sample the RGB and plug that into final color, and then click apply and save, and then we can close it down. we could just open up the media player just to have a double check, make sure the video is working okay. There should be the video in the list. So CTurtle, we can double click on that to load it up, and that's playing great. So we can just click on save and now close this down. Okay, so we just need to create 2 more files for this. The first is going to be a widget blueprint. So if we right click in the folder, go to user interface and then widget blueprint and click on user widget, and we can call this WB underscore video widget. So that widget will actually load the video on screen, but we're going to create a blueprint that will actually trigger the video to be loaded. So we can right click again in the content browser, go up to just blueprint class, click on that, click on actor and call this BP underscore video blueprint is fine for this. We don't actually have to create this blueprint now, we could do this at the end, but the reason I've done this is just so we can test this as we go along. So let's just start with the blueprint. So if we double click to load that up, all we need in the components on the left hand side is a box collision. So if you click on the add button and search for box collision, and it comes in quite small, so we'll just scale that up a bit. It can be tricky to see the scale in reference to the level, so what we can do is I'm just going to dock this blueprint and press compile, and now I'm just going to drag the blueprint in just to give me an idea of scale and how big my collision box is. As long as we can overlap, it's looking fine. I might make it a little bit bigger. We want our third person character to be able to overlap with this, but that looks okay. So now we've got that. Basically a collision box, if you're not familiar with it, anything that overlaps with this collision box in this case will trigger the loading of the video. So at the top, if you click on event graph, and these 3 nodes that are here by default, you can select them and delete them because we don't need them. And then right click on the box collision, go to add event and on component begin overlap, and then right click again, add event on component end overlap. Then drag off of on component begin overlap. So we're going to drag off of the execution socket, which has that white arrow, and then just search for create widget. That gives us a create widget node where it says class. Click on the drop down and just search for the video widget. That's the widget we just created. So select that. And then now from this create widget node, drag off of the execution socket again and search for add to viewport. So when the player overlaps with this collision box, it will create this widget and then it will add it to the viewport. Where it says target add to viewport, it needs to know what it's going to add to the viewport, which is of course the widget. So if we drag off of the return value and plug that into target, and then we just need to load a mouse and change the actual game input mode so we can have control of a mouse. So if we drag off of add to viewport and search for set input mode, and for this we can use set input mode game and UI. So select that. Where it says player controller, just drag off of that and search for get player controller. It just gets an instance of the player's controller, whatever the player is using. So from the set input mode game and UI, if you drag off of the execution socket there and just search for show mouse cursor. Now it's not going to show because it's been filtered out. So if we uncheck context sensitive, we have got set show mouse cursor. We want this one. And where it says where it says show mouse cursor, tick that box and it's going to show the mouse cursor basically. So we can actually see our mouse cursor, which we can use to control the slider. From get player controller, just drag off of that and we just need to connect that to the target for the set show mouse cursor node, and we're actually almost there. This is almost done. So on component end overlap, if we go back to that node, drag off of that, the top socket, and search for remove from parent. So basically, when we enter this collision box, or this box collision, it will load the video. And when we leave this collision box, it will remove the widget from the viewport. So this node needs a target. We're just going to drag off the return value of the create widget node and plug that into target. So if you just drag off of remove from parent, and we could say set input mode game only, and then drag off of set input mode game only and just search for set show mouse cursor. And this time leave it unticked because we don't want to see it. So we're going to leave it off or unticked. Now I might just tidy that up a little bit because I've got nodes overlapping each other. One final thing you may have noticed, in the set input mode game only, it's got a player controller socket. So let's drag off of that and plug into get player controller. And that should all be fine. So press compile. Oops, we need to plug in the get player controller into the show mouse cursor as well. So I've just done that, and now if I press compile, now it's all fine. So let's just press save, compile, and we can close that down. So just to quickly test this, if you just press the green play button at the top and run over to where the box collision is, you should see the mouse appear, and the mouse should also lose control of changing the view as well. But if you run out, then the mouse disappears and you get back control of changing the view. So if you double click to open up the WB widget blueprint, and when we first load this widget, we will be the panel is open to the designer. So on the top left hand side, we can search for canvas, and then just drag a canvas into the designer in the center. We don't need to do anything with this. The next thing we'll add is an image. So top left hand side, search for image. The image itself we could just drag into the actual hierarchy panel. So where it says canvas panel, just drag the image over that and let go, and then we get the image in the top left hand side. And in size, with that image selected, so in size on the right hand side, if you just key in 1920 in X and then 1080 in Y, that fills up the entire screen. However, I'm going to have this so it's just in the center of the screen, our video. Obviously you could have it full screen if you wanted, it's completely up to you, but for this I'm going to keep the size reduced so it just plays in the center. And to do that, where it says 1920, I'm just going to put /2 and then press enter to divide it by 2, and then in 1080 I'm just going to type in /2 and press enter, and that just divides it by 2, so we still keep our 16:9 ratio, but we've just reduced the size of it basically. So with the image still selected, click on the anchors in the details panel, and we're just going to anchor it to the center of the screen, and then I'm going to hover over the image and I'm just going to drag it into the center. I am eyeballing this to a great degree, but somewhere in there that looks like it's in the center, that should be fine. And our anchor point will anchor this element to the center of the screen as well. So let's just press compile, and we can save it at this point. Then in the right hand side where we've got the image row, if you click on drop down and just search for video, you'll see m_video. Now this is the material that we created earlier, and this is what plays. This is the material that plays the video. So select that, and then we can just press compile and save. And let's actually check this now. Let's see if we get a preview. So let's dock this video widget and then press play, and then run into the collision box, and there you go. We've got a preview. It's not playing at the moment. That's fine. That's expected. If we run out again, it disappears. But you can now get an idea of its positioning, how big it is, and so forth. So just press escape to go out of play mode, and then go back into the widget. So to finish off this designer part, we're just going to add a slider. So on the top left hand side, just search for slider, and then drag in a slider. We can drag that so it covers the bottom of the widget. You can style this somewhat. I won't go into much detail here because it's not really relevant to this tutorial, But for example, we've got normal thumb image. If you click on the drop down there and then image size and then Y, and then if you increase that value, you can see the actual slider button or bar increasing in size. So maybe if I do that at 50, and then the X I could do to 20, and we've got a much larger slider button, which is easier to see. But we can leave it like that. For this tutorial, that's fine. The next thing we'll do is just go back to our search panel at the top left hand side and search for progress bar, or search for progress. We'll drag in a progress bar and we'll place that underneath the slider. You can place this, you could place this so it's like directly underneath the slider, and then in its details you've got Z order or Z order. You could put -1 and it places it underneath. However, for this, I'll just keep it at 0, and I'm just going to put it so it sits below the slider. But again, you know, the styling is completely up to you, whatever you prefer. For the anchor points, I'm just going to drag them. I'm just going to eyeball these, anchor it to about there, and then I'm going to select the slider and also drag the anchor point down manually and anchor it about there. If I need to fix this later on, I can come in and fix the positioning if it gets slightly unaligned. But let's see how it goes. And that's the design done. So we can press compile and save. And just one final thing before we move on to the scripting for this part. If we just select the slider, we need to connect some events to it. So in its details, scroll down, so bottom right hand side, we've got on mouse capture begin. So there's a plus button next to that. Just click on the plus button, and then it jumps into the graph and it adds a node with on mouse capture begin. And then if we go back to the designer, so top right hand side, we can switch between the graph and the designer. Click on the designer and then scroll down again in the slider details, and then on mouse capture end, click the plus button again, and that adds another node for the on mouse capture end. Now, to save us going backwards and forwards to the designer, we can actually click the slider in the variables. So on the left hand side, we've got a variables section, and it says slider there, slider _0 for me. It may have a different number for you, but as long as it's the slider. So select that, and at the bottom we can actually see these different events here, and the last one we want to click on is just on value changed. And that's great, and that's all the execution events that we need for this. So I'm just going to drag the graph up. So I'm just going to hold the right mouse button and drag the graph up. And where it says event construct, we can drag off of that. Open source. We might need to untick context sensitive. Then we've got open source. There is open source latent, that basically you can add a delay to when the video gets open, but for this we'll just do open source. We shall, in the media source, we shall select CTurtle. It's the only video or image sequence I've got there. It does need a target, and the target is the media player. So to add that, we have to go back to the variable section, click the plus button. We can just give it a name as media player. Where it says Boolean, click on the drop down, search for media player. And we've got object types, media player, object reference. So click on that. And we do have to make sure we've got the correct media player selected. So press compile. And then with media player selected, we've now got a row at the bottom that says media player. So click on the drop down. We should only have one media player there, and we can click on that. If we press compile again, sorry, we need to drag the media player node in first, get media player, and connect that into target. And now if we press compile, it gets rid of the error. The other two default nodes that came here when we first started, we can just delete them. So event pre-construct, and we'll actually need the event tick, so we can drag that to the bottom for now, but we will keep that. But if we press compile and save, this should actually load the video now. The video should be playing. So if you just go back into the map, just to test this, press the green play button, run over, and there you go. Our video is actually playing now. Obviously the slider isn't set up or anything yet, but let's just press escape. And now let's finish this off. So the next thing we're going to do is connect a play and pause option. So when we activate the slider, it will pause the video. Let's drag in the media player to do this and place that in between. So drag it in, select get media player, drag off of the media player, and then search for pause, like so. And then on mouse capture begin, drag off of that execution arrow and plug it into pause. So basically on mouse capture begin means that when you press the left mouse button, it will pause it. And when it ends, so when we let go of the left mouse button, it will play it. So if we drag off of the media player and search for play, you can see there's a bunch of options here, but we just want play. And then connect that up to the on mouse capture end slider. So we can drag that up. You could give this a test now if you want. I won't do this at this part just to keep the tutorial as short as possible. The next thing that we'll do is that we'll actually connect the slider or the slider position so it updates the position of the video. So on value changed, we can drag off of that and we can search for seek. And click seek and it says target is media player. So we're just gonna have to drag in our media player again and get media player, drag off of that and plug it into target. You can actually use the nodes above. You could just have one node, for example. I can drag off of here and plug that in. It's all the same thing, but just to keep this a little bit tidier, I'm gonna drag in the media player node again and make sure that's just plugged into target. So the on value changed has got a socket in it that says value, and this value just relates to the position of wherever the slider is, and we can use that position to change the position of the video. Now I can drag off of this and search for from seconds and then plug that into time. The problem is this wouldn't work as it is, because what that would do is it will just find the total time and it will just jump the video to the end. So we have to create a range. So it has a range from 0 up to however long the video is. And then that slider can slide that time range backwards and forwards to, you know, the end, the middle, etc., wherever. So there's a few different ways we can do this, but one way is we can use a map ranged clamp node. So if we drag off from value and search for map range clamped and just add that in, and then of the return value of this node, drag off of that and plug into seconds. So next we drag off of the media player and search for get duration. We've got to get the duration of the video that's playing, drag off of the return value of get duration and search for get total seconds. And then where it says return value from that, drag off of that and plug that into outrange B. So in very short summary, how this works is it takes the value of the slider, we put that into a clamp range. So A is going to be 0 and B is going to be 1. And that's the range. That equates to something like 0% up to 100% of the playback range. And then it takes that value from the slider and it converts that value to seconds. And those seconds are fed into the time of the seek node. And that just seeks that specific second of wherever the playback range is. If you wanted to read a bit more into this node, then I'll leave a link in the description, but I won't go into it any further now because this tutorial is already getting too long. So we can press compile and save. Let's just give this a test to make sure it's working. I can press play, run into the collision box, and then if I hover over the slider, hold the left mouse button and drag, I'm now dragging that video backwards and forwards, like so. So now let's go back into the graph and let's finish this off. So to update the progress bar and also the position of the slider as the video plays, we can use the event tick. And this just checks the position of the video constantly. So drag off of the event tick and search for set %. And it says target is progress bar. So drag in the progress bar and get progress bar and plug that into target. And now let's drag in the slider as well and get slider, and we can place that just beneath set %, drag off of that and then search for set value. Now the node that we're looking for is in behavior, So you're going to have to scroll down, and in the behavior section, it's the second to bottom. And it says if you hover over it, sets the current value of the slider. Target is slider. So click on that, and that's the one we want. Target is slider. So now let's drag off of the set percent execution node and plug that into the set value, like so. So now let's drag in the media player and get the media player. Drag off of media player, get time. Let's move that media player node down a bit. Drag off of the media player again, get duration. Drag off of get duration and get total seconds. With that node selected, press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Drag it up and then plug get time into total seconds. We can actually just divide these two together to get the percentage and value updating. So if I drag off get total seconds and then just search for divide and then plug in the total seconds beneath that value, and then just drag off of the socket, the divide socket, and plug that into the in value. And this now will actually update the position as the video plays. So this is almost done now. If we just press compile and save, there is one final issue we need to fix. If we just press play, you can see we've got jittering. So if I'm going to press escape, the reason is because the event tick is conflicting with the on value change. If I actually just hover over on value change and disconnect it, press compile and save, just to show you this for a moment. If I press play, and you can see it's updating now. But the problem is we've lost our ability to slide. So if I press escape, we can fix this. I'll just plug that back in. So to fix this, we can just place a switch to make sure that the on value change is only active when the slider is being dragged backwards and forwards, and that stops the conflict with the event tick. So drag off of on value change and search for branch. And by default, it'll just go through true. And because it's ticked, it means the condition or the Boolean is set to true. So this won't actually make any difference. But let's drag off of the condition, make sure context sensitive is ticked, and then just promote this to a variable. With that node selected, we'll just rename it. So in its details, just rename it to is video playing. So by default, this video is always going to be playing because that's just how we set it up. If I just press compile and save, with this node still selected, you'll see in the details it says is video playing and it's ticked. So we're going to tell this Boolean that by default, yes, it should be true. And from the branch then, let's drag off of the false socket and plug that into seek, hold Alt, hover over true, and then left click to disconnect the true branch from being connected. Now what's going to happen is it's going to check this Boolean condition. So is video playing? By default, yes, that's true. It's going to check the true branch and it's not going to do anything. So now we need a way to turn this switch on and off. So we do want this connecting to the seek when the video isn't playing, and we can just connect this Boolean to this play and pause button to do that. So where we've got is video playing variable on the left hand side, just drag that in and select set is video playing, and then drag off of pause and plug that in. And then of course, because it's paused, then the video isn't playing. So what happens now, it gets changed from its default setting. It gets changed to false. And now this on value change will update the seek value. We've swapped the branch that it's going from. But the second we release the left mouse button, we want the video to go back to playing. So let's drag in is video playing again, set it, this time tick it, and then connect those two. So now when we release the mouse button, it's going to change the Boolean and it's going to go back to its default behavior. Let's just press compile and save. So technically now this should work. If we go into third person map, press play, run over to the collision box, the progress bar is updating, there's no jitter. The one final problem is if I try sliding, it's getting clamped or it's getting stopped in certain areas, it's jumping around. So we just press escape, This is because there's still a conflict happening between the slider and the event tick. So we can add the switch in to the event tick as well. And then we're done. So drag off of the event tick, search for branch, drag is video playing underneath the branch, get it, so select get it, and then plug this in to the condition. Everything else we can leave as is. So its default position, yes, the video is playing. The second we press this button here, it's going to go to false here because we press pause. It turns the switch to false. This goes to false here, and then it stops the event tick connecting to set percent or value. And then that fixes that final jitter that we're getting. So I'm going to press compile, save, and I'm going to press play, and let's test this now. So the video is playing, it's updating. I'm going to scrub to the right and to the left, and finally we are there. So thanks for watching the tutorial. If you've got any questions, please leave a comment or feel free to join the Discord and you can ask any questions there.